Shurang Digi Andando di Dunjituni, Sere. Can do that. The Consukalik, Consukalik, this.
Are you guys tired or how's it going?
And Zamza, you know, the Chika. Tapore and a Katuka Tuna Divora, Jimachibu Mayan, did Nimahanza Rodi, Zamza Kalika Sigra.
It's possible that we get a bit tired, you know, doing this every day like this, but especially also if you have any doubts that arise during the class, you can ask them straight away, it's fine, you don't have to wait.
Yes,
you're very, paying attention really well, and it's quite impressive.
Chidagi Zamzam Gonyoda, Korangi Tolamashi, Chichediga, the Dindichi Lawaina, Kadere, and the Lansubaro, Zamzam things so do that. And Zamza Shinichini, Galera, the continent tape download this later away.
It can be a bit confusing sometimes, right? It's talking about all these debates and different ways of thinking, and it can be a bit complicated. So it's really helpful, to really sit down and think about it. And there's also all sorts of books that you can read that can help you try to understand the arguments being made in a better light.
Tatanda Tayina Zodoedra, Tinimangosuna, Ani Dungechumo Tangsa, Dungechumo Tangdalana, Ani Yevela Sobe Dungechi, so Judoba Chavala, Niler. Tila ani pedon tuni, ra. Ta pedi caresna, alidia pichi drosartaya, and just dona di ra. Seshing, mishing, and a lapatuan. The Chanagi jing is Susoga Nanichin, and Ichi Kumaja in a Karina Takola, and Midi Nani Sasara. Dinde Michi, and it cannot get Jitangi Segi, could engage Che Naya. That is Masin and a Lapachi push to Shana. Ra, and a copy Gavira Kalan or Nase Mason Lapachi Butunada. Came do some ra. Chitangi music lapatu in the Kunju de Galata. Can he chamberaya? In a dung it delicious Samatan and Chunju Chawara. Teacher, Annie, Teganashi gate and the Kete, me dungi. Chedan Nazunda Zamni Galangaras like Dungi Nawa in a car in the Dungi Mambojuris. Tigi Dungi Digi and the Social Delazusation and Impena, Magic Saracharan, Kotolan, the Telepazuba Comni Contomalan, Shawaina. Ani Kanyawa Kiawa Chimanyawa la Suban Royagi, Ani Tende we do the Tetu Rastra. Tende in the Ane years to do it Tena, only a Kandayabum dos, doing it under Susan de Zamingala Devi Ringla and doing it to Senchibala, Tene, Ani Kiawa Shimala Suba, and Yawan and Dromagoegi, Tende doing it, Papa to egg in the Chatuna, Gawala, Chivala, Dora, Kandayabum Dula.
And so we pick it back up in verse 72, right? And so which says, so this is talking about avoiding the cause for suffering in the hells by accepting small sufferings, right? So the verse says, why is a man condemned to death, not fortunate if they are released after having his hand cut off? Why am I who am experiencing human suffering not fortunate if by that I am spared from the hells, right? So this is talking kind of the types of punishment that might have been present a long time ago, right? That if someone gets caught for killing or stealing or something very grave, then they might be executed, right? That might be kind of the punishment for that kind of thing. Whereas if then instead of being executed, they merely have their hand cut off, then so in general, getting your hand cut off is still quite a big deal, right? But in comparison to being killed, that person might consider themselves quite fortunate. Yeah. So in a similar way, when we're thinking about the different types of sufferings and difficulties that we undergo on a daily basis, right? So we have the variety of sufferings that we experience, like from heat and cold and all sorts of things like that. Then, if we really think about it, it is much better to be patient and not to develop anger and with respect to these small sufferings, because by getting angry, right, then we are simply creating the causes that will lead us to the hell realms. And so if we think about comparing the suffering of the hell realms with these kind of small sufferings of heat and cold and so forth, then it's kind of like why would we want to get angry at things like that when they're sparing us from the suffering of the hells?
That better turning in that turn the Kalana, Tadi Dungi, the Zamyans, Tadalading Aransta, me Ludin Tabira, indigenous Tandaki Dungi, Chunju Temple Tanera, the Zamlayans, and Dagi Zuber Muninas, Lediga Susu Zubo Gomatuna, Dungi Chunju Zubo Gomatuna, Tena Ani Yewe, Dungi Ju, Chesanga Zubo Gomatu, Tene Ananga to Dibasa or Dibasana, Newa Juchaora. Today in the Ani Toa de Ani Toa di chide duba majilati, toa di karchi nga zo doyala tabshi tango mare, dogo re sarra. Chide do majilati karichi ni dogo yo mare sarra, karichi nga zo ki ani pangi yo mare dola.
So then that verse is giving us the example, and now we have the next verse indicating the meaning indicated by that. So it says, if I'm unable to endure even just my present suffering, then why do I not restrain myself from being angry, which is the cause of suffering in the hell realms? And so, when we think about likewise, when we think about our human suffering right now, that are kind of fairly small in comparison with the suffering of the hell realms, then if we're not even able to bear these kind of suffering, how will we do in the hell realms, right? It's that when we're faced with much greater suffering, we're going to have a much harder time. So at the moment, right, it is actually because of not being able to withstand or kind of bear these types of suffering, then we get angry, and by getting angry, we accumulate all sorts of non-virtue, and that non-virtue itself is what's going to send us to the hell realms. So actually, simply by not being able to bear it, we are sending ourselves into much greater types of suffering. So it's kind of asking ourselves, well, why do we not restrain ourselves from creating the very cause for much greater type of suffering?
Tadi saji di nilai kalau itu nana ane dengan cemburu dube sera kacila segawa meri palan saji nyires haralu cizam su Choose Tangalo, Chow Hamacho, Kandislanare, Tandagi Mitsu de la Chashaway, Tizu Mamuchi Trolatandora, choose Tan, Gawache, that in the Sonamatane, choose Chang, Ane, Tigi, Randoya do Mare, Jingitoya Mundura, Rando the Genda Kaya, my Mandupara, and Lava de Lanatuta, Jubacha. Tanda in Arazo, low shoe game, Maran, Yakochina, Mitsana, Loche, Tower, Chidande. Chiamatavala, the sunny shea in a had a comara. In a Chitangitan, Santanachina, this is to be Keshara. Today in Sanning around Jubacheco, Marakarin the Chokora in it, and that Chetan Suzuki to Sutra Mawata, and that you might watch at the Tanga, Mrs. the Chicken Chitumasum, Milapen, Totumas, Chichi, Tumasacho, Shimayanga, called to give me around Haumara, so ding Tayomara. Then the burn rhyme at the dig and Jubachi rest. Today in any. So this is Trolatana, Jubachata, Ani Tati Kachila, Zubra Chine, Naranza, Tandaki Kangi Chunjula, donation, and Ichi, Zubacomela Subatachi, Zunduche, Karina, Jamata, Karina, the Digi Kangi Mambuchila, Manzuko donation in Nara, Zubachena, Ani, Ndoa Tataki, so turn to Bala, Gawacho, Ani, the Digi Kangi Kalejan, Mission Bala Ropache, and Mission Bala Karchenta, Doa Tataki, turned that Duya Shidra, Jedo Duela, and the Chiba in it, and it's also like Gawachi degrees. This has to go to the
So then, the next session is talking how it is suitable to take joy in hardships, since they accomplish a great meaning, right? So rather than kind of allowing ourselves to get angry at these kind of hardships that we might face, instead taking joy in them. And so even just on the basis of the two outlines that we see, it says, regretting that, despite squandering however many previous lives, we have not accomplished our own or others' welfare. And the next outline reads, it is suitable to take joy in accomplishing the welfare of all sentient beings by bearing present hardships. So even just thinking in terms of how the outlines are describing it, then we can think that, up to now we've actually, wasted a lot of time in not really accomplishing our own and others' welfare, right? So by allowing our mind to become angry and to not be accepting or taking on these hardships, we have allowed our mind to get angry and created all this non-virtue, and that not only is an obstacle to accomplishing others' welfare, but even just for our own welfare, for our own benefit, we've not really been very conducive, right? So all of us, we're quite young still, so from one point of view we can say, well, we still have time. But in another way of looking at it, it's actually we don't know when we will all, die, right? This is something that we don't know. We could all die tomorrow. So there's not really any time to waste. So it's really important to take care of how we spend our time, because then when we get older and we continue like this, we might generate a lot of regret, right? Thinking, oh, I didn't really use my time properly to help others and so on and so forth. So rather than allowing that to happen, we should really learn how to bear with these hardships, such that we can really, as it says, take joy in accomplishing both our own and others' welfare, which we can do by bearing these present hardships.
Zawada tingi dwa dila karala na ani debi tanda debi tanda sila sos ngara zo ta chi shenji loji ta nga zo karo chi lega kari na lopa do chirwa chesa suzu yende cha da tende gi chi so so la goya da tende gi jang jang chi nga zo gi debi tanda sila sola ta chi nga zo gi chakwa da tende lo tende gi ani sila so nyawara tongta nyojo chang ani china nga zo gi jum gewa 주신질로 두바 인자 아니 들은 데부 동해 좀 거라 근데 인자 아니 근데게 아니 좀 겨워들 때네 아니 데부로 동다 뭐 녀는 용거야 근데 맞아 가서 용거가 차고 레스라 근데 인자 다기 있어 근데 제와이나 아니 랑 다기 있어 랑기 던다 다 수저를 나란도 다 민가이 제와이나 나라기 던에 누구 말에 현지 던야 제도 말했어. 근데 인자 딱 아주 간다 가를 나오서는 지 내가 춘주지도 고액이 내가 던데질 뭐 붙이는 거 코는라. 내가 lok과시는 거 코는데 되와이나 겨우 심하게 던다야 두고 말에 던데기 던다야 두고 말에 소소기 던다야 두고 말에 미진바기 던다야 두고 말했어.
And so the verse itself, the first of these reads, for the purpose of worldly desires, I experienced the sufferings of being burned and so forth in thousands of hells, but I have not achieved the purpose of self or others. Right? So, and when it says kind of for the purpose of worldly desires, so it is mainly due to attachment that we tend to kind of get distracted by all these various types of things that we aspire to, like getting, all these kind of worldly work that we try to attain, all these various things. And in general, because of that attachment and so forth arising, then it also involves a whole lot of non-virtuous actions that we engage in order to attain those. But actually, when we think about it, the results of those non-virtuous actions are going to be rebirth in the lower realms. In particular, here it says that, the hell realms. So actually, by trying to attain these various things, right, all these kind of peripheral things that we might be aiming towards, then we are engaging in all sorts of non-virtue, and then as a result, we can spend thousands of years or thousands of times being reborn in the hell realms. And at the same time, not only do we end up suffering as a result, but we don't actually accomplish our own benefit, and nor do we accomplish others' benefit. So actually we get very little done as a result, apart from suffering.
Roa tata ki se ten dubala gawa ribas la tata no ngara zo missing nalo la so ji kale jem ani ji jem ba tama tron so zo ko ma kare chewaina gewe gi lega la so gi ani ji dongne de de chetu ina sra digi ko la shibora tende ani ngonzo jende dubala ani jende ji duwa ina de la ani tsendela ani so kalor de zamla ani neba memba Sindela never move ani tell a tene and it hurts you do ra. Chitanga to me abo, Jimmy Karina chicken, Susola pensing kitchen, Legachi in the Sindela Chibuka Tobotomine, Mara, Mi, Tataina Yagayore, and it's so called on the Chibuera. They any turn, sending to her and do any tension that it was Shamala Supera, and in so the drama boy again, Tindegi tension to Restra, tension Tajan do to waste. Duba inzang ani ndoye ne sem tan roala nebis neba sewala ndoye gi dungi tu ba sewara sewa na ani dinde gi nga zo gi thandala ni ani mission ba gi kanye da tu ba se gi thandala ne suzu gi ani ya po da chewa ina ani tila ani gawa bashi the cherry lady penangazo, the Ganzo legal of Chumbuch, the military, Yapoch Chituina, Sosola Gawachida. Then I think Daganashi, Tanda Ditan, the Chawashima in a Sosola. Kaduna Chikalota, Gawari Resla, the Sosola Jisiran Chedo Chilaji.
So then the next verse reads, so these do not harm me like that, and also achieve the great purpose. It is suitable to be only happy about the sufferings that clear the harm of sentient beings. So, on the other hand, as opposed to allowing ourselves to get caught up in all these peripheral things, then if instead, whenever we are facing difficulties, we are able to bear hardships, right? So whenever we are practicing virtue, whether it's generosity or ethics or patience or whatever it might be, it can be quite difficult, and we bear a lot of hardships along the way. But if instead of getting angry or instead of getting caught up in the difficulty of the hardships, we really think that, this kind of hardship has a great meaning. It's very meaningful, at least, right? Unlike the hardships which we get angry at and then that leads us to the hell realms, this is incredibly beneficial because even for this life, even if we're just thinking about this life alone, then we are not creating as much harm as we might otherwise be. And also, we know this in general, that if someone has a very well-meaning attitude and they're trying to help others and be kind to others and so forth, then oneself is also made happy by that, right? What people will like you, and you have a very happy and well-balanced life just by trying to benefit others as well. So even just in terms of this life, it's much more beneficial to bear with these hardships. But then also with respect to thinking about future lives, that by avoiding that non-virtuous actions, we are avoided the suffering of the lower realms. But likewise, due to bearing with these hardships and engaging in all sorts of virtuous actions, we create a lot of benefit for others, right? And then that benefit for others also is something that makes us feel good, right? It's something that, when we reflect upon it and we kind of rejoice upon what we have done, right? Thinking, I did so well by others, is something that also makes us happy. So both in terms of this life and in terms of future life, bearing with these hardships and maintaining that virtue is much more kind of profitable, much better.
Dagi dala leba chebala toa gabas, the Suzola Dado Chiva in the Ra, did Dadla, Yabo Chumada, Koyabo Chanam, control the Tado and the Sajura, Magawash, Ra, Ticheba di Pagawala, the Lichiju Mariella, named Kitanga Sajiga and the Shidona, Tizune, Kalatini, Shida Guasamara, Shibasaiba, Ani, Tadilla Digala, Ani, Dagi said Dalla Liber Chebala Toa Gabala soon, yes. Dalla Tuba Tangasa, Taba Dubala, Muzupa Pamba, kissing under me, Mission Bagita, so Magasaki Midlani, Dura Tangwada, Anicola di Getachimbo Chawada, today, not to Tado Ganga, Kashimagawa Chajura. Tinde Magawa di Papango, yes, Lara, teacher. Ani Dewa Dubala, Muzupa Pamba. Ani ko dinde we dadla ani debu da chibu da dinde chungwa ina ya o nga di gawi mundus khas nga medela maga enza kola chibu shuna so gawi mundula chiro ti papa ngo res dinde chiji yo mara ani nyeba drubala muzuba ani dinde we da so ga maga sadla ya ani chi jono no jola soba ani chi chubu do chawa ina ya nga o ko pya wa cha nga dinde mundula ne ti dinde gi muzuba lo la ti madewa chi chaido ti dinde cheji yo mara papa ngo rela.
So then we have the next major outline talking about overcoming anger towards that which benefits our enemies, right? So in general, we have these people that we don't like. Here they're kind of called our enemy, right? And so it's about avoiding various types of anger that we might develop towards them. So in terms of the outlines, we see that the first outline is talking about abandoning intolerance towards praise and fame for our enemies, right? So if someone that we dislike, they become famous or they get all sorts of fame like that, then we kind of don't like that, right? So kind of trying to avoid that or abandon that kind of aversion. And then likewise, the second outline is abandoning intolerance towards their happiness, right? So also if it's someone we don't like, when they get happy, they get something that's nice, we don't really like that, right? So abandoning that attitude. And then thirdly, abandoning intolerance towards their worldly gain, right? So similarly, when they get, some kind of, when they get rich or they get all these nice things, we dislike that, right? So in these kind of ways, abandoning these types of aversion towards the happiness of our enemy.
tere ani dala teba ta thabala so duba muziba pamba de la ni je ta ti tambu de khala na ra devi su juimbe ani deri batans sosola dewa thaya gi judi be ani nga zon de gru sosola dewa ta na ga do ra mission mal de na ma ti ya jinze ke yo marla ta sosola chi buru na sosola dewa da ri ba da ra jigir sme do ani ye devi juimbe ani mende ba di ani phaka kores khazna sosola dewa yu ga do ani kona dadle dewa yu ko ga ro chesa nga zogi sosola dewa yu ga gre ani dadle chi dewa do ta chi nyembaro khartho ina anzo maga ya chido dindi chiju marela ra.
So in terms of the first, right, abandoning towards the praise and the fame, then it's the outlines again read that it is unsuitable to want it. It is suitable to want it since it is the cause of our own happiness, right? So in a sense, it's talking that it's kind of a weird kind of way of thinking that when we get something nice, right? Well, when we here we go. So when we get something nice like that, then we become very happy. So then it's kind of strange that when someone else gets something nice that, we would become unhappy as a result, right? So thinking that there's some kind of fault in the thinking in that way. And then the second outline reading, it is unsuitable not to want it since it is the cause of others' happiness. And so again, thinking that since it makes others happy, why should we kind of have a problem with that?
Right? Ta di o de la kharle na ani ra devi jimbe insarina jimbe ani tindu bari bas ta tindu la vai na ta khandre la na yenji ani dila da chatsi dila yenji yende dente pes kete gawa detomna ta yenji la ni mi shimba gi chana la torata ni ra kira ya podo simba zambo do chana be ji re ni re la torata na ra kisi dile ta vai na ani gawe detol na be gawora nga mi tora tangwa da chana ya poro chi rela na susul ga ya chi do as te ga na sin ye ani ye chu chang ni ye se de de ne ta kran ya mi shen bala batora ta chana se ba zambro chana me pendo chambro chi rela wa ina chi te tar ga mi chi kran ka chin ga ma ko ya ga ro as ra kala kora la chi gi de ga zo du ja sa na ko la ne ra de chi jo mare ani kesi kran mi tora ta ya ko chen chana ga wa da chi wa de ne yu do as te ga na sin mi chi parel ta khanda ra sin ni de penzi chiba re la bra dewan de du nim de de insa khanagi ani mission bala phatora tangwa de de chena koya gagir wasra khashin gagir mare gagir wasla chuji gawi de dewan de khanala ani gawi dewa thog mission bagi tora tang khanala gawi dewa chili do wasra dila ani dewan dila ani dewan ju ra dewan ju da ani khana matho me bala de mari ba me bala de driba susula tora tang ani chena dri de pe ga go resra daga nashi yende demba na jita mitu zu kar chulana michi sanu tang kheba da yende deni du ge yende yoba du ge kar san na chi cha kar san yende demba na chi nang musra dunzu ge kar chulana yende pai choja yin cheza mi sanu jasham tang thuni da du ge ani yen la kalota chi ten tora da thapa da dili chen su su sala chambu che ge ani dili chewa ina chodo chupare sala ga ya por re la.
So then the root verse itself for this first outline reads, should someone else find joy upon praising my enemy as an excellent person, why mine do you not praise them too, and likewise make yourself happy? That joyous happiness of yours would be a source of joy, not something prohibited, a precept given by the excellent ones and a supreme means for assembling others. Right? So again, we can think that when we ourselves are being praised, right? We really like that. Yeah, if someone comes along and they're praising us, then our mind becomes very happy as a result. So then, why is it that if it's our so-called enemy and they're getting praised, and yet we see them being praised, and then we become unhappy as a result? So it kind of doesn't really make sense. On the one hand, we can think, well, that person is exactly like me, and exactly like all sentient beings. We all wish to be happy, and we don't wish to suffer. And so just like me, right, if just as I'm happy when I'm praised, they're also happy when they're praised. So, why do I just make myself miserable by disliking that? Yeah? So it kind of seems very strange. But likewise, that it's just a way to make ourselves happy rather than miserable. And likewise, it's something that only creates kind of closeness between people, right? As opposed to finding that something to dislike. If we can just ourselves also praise that person, or simply like that person enough to kind of not dislike their when people are praising them, then it creates harmony between people. So not only does it create joy for ourselves, right, which we can do by praising that person and rejoicing for that person in the way that they're being praised, but likewise it creates closeness between people. So it's a much wiser course of action than simply getting angry or disliking that praise.
지당 어제 인데 연구다 결혼을 인가 같이 소소 마가스라니 기아오잖아. 거기 마주는 따다서 그라 이 sem번 나보래다. 근데 sem번 나보 쉬어야래. 다 소소는 가지 대부도 지우 가지나 거여라. 미심발라 있는 뜻마가 지지다. 내가도 그 차도라. 차도로 지당 일단 지대 나로 랑도 연구 소소 정바에도 공소가 칸바지보다 저 모터지보다 아니 보고도 저희나 약보카 하면 칼이 야오는 그냥 거유문다. 그라 티치 배쳐충라. 더 소소래 얘는 디고 소소나 칸바야보다 지 모터야 보이나 안 소소 지보고다 가상도 참보는 야보이나 티백 소소를 거유다. 미심반에는 그 티된다 메줘라. 그라 코다 근데 지고야 말아.
So we kind of have this sometimes, right? That when we see someone getting something nice or being praised or whatever, and we kind of dislike that, right? We have in Tibetan it's like it's a black mind, right? It's like a black mind that kind of thing. We don't have a good translation in English. Yeah, so it's like a negative way of thinking, and it kind of comes down to jealousy, right? That we see other people being praised and so forth, and we kind of have this attitude of not really liking it. And so, we see this person and they have a really beautiful house, or they have really nice children, or they get the nice car, or whatever it is, and somehow we don't like that. If it was us having these things, if it was us having the nice car and the children and the house and all that, we would be really happy. But when it's someone else, we don't like that. So it's really kind of, there's no good reason for making that differentiation. It's kind of a bit pointless thinking like that.
제가 저기 심발을 처시요 말아. 이내게 배배기 시방줘라. 미 내가 정보장자 친이도 아니 그뒤에 다는 저기 레비쇼래. 포지티브 쇼래 상당히 인지라. 그래 심발 가오래라. 그게 심발 가오요. 정보여 지게. 딱 그뒤에 두제 쇼래 상당히 심발 두제 심발 나고래라. 이내야 가서 전신에 전화지도 갈 통해다 말아. 이내 그 시방 이지털이요 말아. Bad mind, good mind, and
yeah. So yes, the mind doesn't really have a color, right? But nevertheless, we have this convention in Tibetan to say, like, if it's something that's a good type of mind, that's positive and nice, then we'd call it like a white mind. And if it's something negative, if it's harmful, then we call it a black mind. So really, it's not that it actually has a color; it's just a kind of a convention, right?
Hindi में ऐसा आता है आपका जो अच्छा काम करता है ईमानदारी से काम करने वाला है ना उसको क्या बोलते हैं उसको माइंड को साफ सुथरा है ना साफ सुथरा फिर थोड़ा गंदा के काम करते ऐसा अच्छा नहीं सोचते ना हाँ ईमानदार हाँ वो तो तुझे दे ठंबो माइंड कलर ये तो honest है ना honest
सात्विक भाव बोलते हैं
हाँ जी हाँ जी
सात्विक भाव बोलते हैं जिसका
सात्विक भाव अच्छा
वो तामस जिसका
हाँ जी तो सात्विक में
केरंग के गुरु हिंदी है ना
पर ये कौन से क्या ही कर लगे ना सब
I think in my mother tongue Telugu I think there are some expressions where white is considered like clear and dark is not so clear.
خلاص ठीक
네, 공기 수수기 캐릭터라 된다게 조당 잡고
됐어요.
We have also like light and dark.
제가 저도 낙보단 칼포마임 받지 그냥 데 그래 문바당 우부기 잡지기래
Are.
There's a word in Karponangshing and
Kare are.
just on the Karponangshing and then Munpa, the
Munpa the Nakpo.
Nakponangshing.
Yes. 지랑 아주 이지기라. zamniga le ödi yaga do tsugo. Yaga ge di ödi zole pe yaga tsugo. Pena azu nyama ke janga hindi ke janga do ro. Ani gige do zuge ande tana konzo ge ngazu chimiro pa야 do. chimiro paida. Badalem. chimiro ne pawa ina. Di karatse wona ni kyangi migi ani sema napoda na kundo mashiba momba do so. Ro. Tinde inza di ödi pe yaga tsugo. konzo chishi di na ni ödi ngazu chimi bhaya chimi bayaro the chida öde ranshiki yapotse.
Yeah, so we also have this kind of similar tradition, and so we often think in terms of the butter lamp, right? And we say that the light of the butter lamp is kind of clears away the darkness, and so also in that way it's seen as something like the darkness, kind of also the mental darkness, and so you can say it clears away like that. So the light is considered positive, and the darkness is considered negative. Yeah.
먼저 원스랭이 마디 hindi 장가 돌아. 근데 갱기 갱라 데 자와지 줘라. 자와 루트 줘. 디초니 아니 디 카라라 원나나 단에 의기 소소 의기 민바 참아 세도야지. 라. 왜나게 아니 민바 나고도 세요라. 디나신기 키란즈 단다가 또 랩도 치고라. 인 키란즈 랩도기 아니 시야연데 야고 자니 마옴피게 아니 치칼 미신바라 마리 모바세다 소소가 마리 모바드마 타야지 대장도 맞지 대lum바 춘춘춘줄래 저는 좀 피한 토와 쇼라니 나도 야가게데 모남제다
가르디 그러면 남게
모남제도 나도 gelai lep투라 나도 파이라 원세데 야가게데 콘조 케바드리어 원나스 아니 콘조 켜서 단달 lep투레스 단다 이야 포장 안데 치우레스 마음 포장서 사자 코조코조드니어라 던졸래 멤버스 ya sebu zo tu res ra ta di chiding ya tan da chima chi thing za ni jo ji re tan da sum
so back when I was studying Hindi and Hindi and Sanskrit
Hindi da Sanskrit ni je
so both studying both Hindi and Sanskrit in Varanasi, so we had the teachers there, they were working from a particular root text, and in it had a particular verse that they can kind of commented on, and again it had this imagery of the light defeating the darkness and things like that. And so the teacher said that this is kind of like you studying now. So through your study, you're creating this light that is overcoming the darkness of ignorance. And so we also hope that in the future you can, just like now you are the students, but in the future you can be the one dispelling the darkness for others as well, wherever you kind of go.
yin dewe ju yin be se te mundu mri ba gabala de ni che ni de la harsna yin dewa ra mi shimba dewa la ani mundu na shin ani pena chik tora tawa da kharchon ti ani kuzula dewa yin ba de soso nan de me na mande na mande bi ke ani soso ganam ju ro te ma soso magawa chewa ina rangi dewa ye nyamba chi re esla khajna mi jemba la thado che su ge divasa ora tene indi rangi maung pa ge dewa we de ma nyamba do re esla ra 로와다 데나 젤라 데와 르리바 제가 된데 인자 아니 소소 파게 미드 아니 데와테도 켜나게 아니 콜라 데와 따따레서는 데야디 아니 진짜데 덴바데 치고레스라 계시 켜나 미셴바지게 데와다 야포 중화들라 마가와 데네 차도 채와이나 파게라 켄네기 말데 소소게 아니 게월마 게와디 마냠도 레
So then the next section is dealing with abandoning that anger towards others' happiness, right? So it says in the outline, so there are two outlines, right? If one does not wish others to be happy, one's own happiness will degenerate, right? So again, when we see someone in happy, right, and then if our response to that is to become unhappy as a result, then actually at the end of the day we are only really harming ourselves and our own happiness, right? Because through getting jealous, right, through that jealousy that doesn't like the other person's happiness, we are kind of generating all this non-virtue within our mind, and that creates the cause for our own future suffering. On the other hand, we can think that actually, by disliking their happiness, by getting jealous and so forth, in no way does it harm the other person, right? So it's, just by ourselves getting unhappy about their happiness, we're not harming them in any way, we're only really harming ourselves. So it's really kind of not a wise way to behave, and such that by not wishing them to be happy, we're actually only degenerating our own happiness.
This dewa de cancer tapata de netanda jelala oni chitan dela de no kete tanda dela saji khorana la yakardula na yen dewa la mendena rangi dewa nyamba tanda dochara ti tsasi dela de lagdura ani yen yang tetar de chirshi kete chude mendena ani mishambala ani dewan de dewa yungbar te dewa de ani kede chana ani gage mebaina mendena sra ani lange jinsu jimana pena ngaso chi la sete wada mitle nyamba te wada dinra jinsu cheba pambi shirs ani dinde tozo cheba la chana la goba yumares ra shojini chana mi apo cha chana gage mares wa na magaya dinde chigdo has shojini ya mikaji chi nyamba te wada jamba tonga da dinde chigo ras ti kana dosho rojras shojini mi yabo chana gage mares shojini chana ge chi nyamba la so bate wala andi dinde chigi resra dinde ge ani kar lega gewaro gendro chagres wa chagres ani dig khalana thonda ma thonda la sendela ngara so thonjo nyonchi ge ani susuge khalorta sendela susu ma nyamdo ya darwa mila thado chidini mijina ko yapu tsugi mara un nyamdo ya da Geshema lebe ani nyamdo ya gi jucha go resla ti ya hindi nal tis mara ro dira khare di la chasi dila khala dila da अब हिंदी आता है ना
थोड़ा
हाँ इसमें क्या बोलते हैं यो जो स्टैंजा ना एक इसको नहीं ले यदि दूसरों को प्रसन्न करना नहीं चाहे तो है ना वेतन उपहार और खाना आदि देने से अनुचित आपको दिल होता takanda di denda di la ora kasi nganso gi mitila ani jamda yabo chade kola ga midos yang khala rote ene ro chigdo ra tinde chena ya di ya chana gewasa ajras kan gilega shojini mi di yabo chana ga ma shojini ya yabo chigre di lega den gendu ro re la ora क्योंकि इसे इन कार्यों का सलाशन दूसरों को हिस्सा रोपचे द दिल लगे तो चेतना तंदा दो दी दिला होरा खागे सोचिने अनि मिडिया बचाना मागावाचे सोचिने या कोला खलाटे एंड रोबटे नेबटे दिने चिगोरास तीन गेंदर रोज थोंग दोस दिने की छे देवाइना अनि लेकन गेंदर रोदा सुजो मारु बचेवाइना छे दिले ने चिगरे चेवा शिमाला अनि सोजला मान्याम रोयगी जुचा होरा
So then the root verse says, it is said that others are made happy in this way, but if you do not want them to have this happiness, then you could cease giving them wages and the like, but you would be adversely affected both in this and future lives. Right? So Geshema was debating, it seemed the root text is not clear, and she was also looking at the Hindi or Sanskrit version as well. But to kind of summarize, then what this is saying again is, if we, on the one hand, we dislike it when other people are happy, we dislike it when other people have nice things, but on the other hand, we sometimes do give presents to people, or we have people that we give wages to, like they're employed for us, or something that we treat them nicely on the one hand, and it kind of creates a very contradictory type of behavior, right? That on the one hand, we see them being happy, or when something nice happening for them, we dislike it. But on the other hand, we might still give them food, or we still might give them wages. And so if we really dislike their happiness, why do we do those things, right? We should just stop those as well, right? If we really thought about it. But then if we really did that, then it would kind of really be, it would be detrimental to ourselves, firstly, in this life, but also in future lives, right? So it's highlighting this very kind of contradictory behavior, which would just lead to our own suffering as opposed to really much harming others.
Tadi dina ra chawa dina saji dina kasna dina asta jinse de la tewaina jende wan dina ra jende dina riba ina de jenla ani kalota nganso ge dewan devana ti jinse de dembare la ora dina sa ani jen denduna de ani riba la de ta ti ki chawa de la khalona rangi la da rangi yende jubi chela rangi yende de sigi juwa de mission baji onzo la tora da sid na do le de dora ani jubi chena ani ches yen la dewa de ba ches cheza 미심바지 소설 떠다는 라니데 대원도 봤는데 맞지 아니 옌 코랑기 떠다니 들어야 대화요래라 대원도였어 다 내가 나신기 코랑기 미심발라 옌지 연데 나로시는 게 미심백이 연데 봐줘야 이나라 주비체 라라야 대화 찜문도를 가진되고 말 대화 연구를 했으라 라나 대화 문도치스 대 아니 간다 갈라고서나 대선 거쳐야
The engine the pet local.
인질랑 갈래 인질나는
Mich sosola toratana nga tsu yang consulat beki pores in yang consul sosola pensun toratana na karchen nga tsu kipu mares tende tawore
ondele tendera dit kalen dileda onde vice sa jenla dewa debarchis jenji yunde jibitsela dra tachi chen jenji yunde la jen shamba paru no jiwala isra tela ani rade Mundu bas tela dewa mundu bas wayade kena gyawa ro chagdule ne adi eli dura ge tanda simba jodi na taimba tanda ta udi gala ani mi simba sole ani torata tene chena phagi midila dewa du dos ta simba dige ral torata ende chena ya rani la chena dewa du go rasra dewa yungu res bas dilla wata 미심바지기라 다 미심다지가 소설을 떨었다가 인도 로치라 제나 아니 디 미터라 당게들에 코로나에 대원도데 인지 돌도 라 근데 이래스라 다 옌지 있어 옌지들 내가 먼저 미심바게 옌이인데 주비츠나 미심바디 약으로 치리니 나도 주지 신나라 근데 랑라랑라디 소설을 거라 랑라야 대와 디 mende였다 대와 mendel디 티켓을 갈라나 파기 떨어 미심바지기 떨어 소설을 떨었다니 미심바디야 되어태고라라 다 아주 생기는데 지디 소설을 가지네 되어태고면 돼야 되어온 거야 집어라 얘기 미심바 떨었다는 가 집어온 거야다 미심베기 가 떨었다니 가 집어야다 아니 파기 이제 집어온 거라 어디라고 네네
So I think who's doing what to who. So the next verse says, verse 80, right? So it says, since one wishes all sentient beings to have happiness, then having generated the mind of enlightenment, when sentient beings find their own happiness, sorry, I was looking at the I was looking at the wrong verse, that's why I was confused. So it's 79. When people describe my own good qualities, I want others to be happy too. But when they describe the good qualities of others, I do not wish to be happy myself. Right? So, in general, right, when people are praising us, right, if they're saying nice things about us, they're praising our own good qualities, then we're very happy about that, right? And that happiness kind of makes it so that actually we're very open-minded to also being happy for others, right? So why is it, now the question is kind of coming like, why is it when others' qualities are being praised, do we not develop the same kind of happiness, right? Why do we, instead get jealous and so forth and make ourselves unhappy instead of likewise becoming happy by joining in with the praise?
Dewa dubala mi shimbaji chi kar shimba ina su ina kar dewa dubadila nganzu tela muzu ina magawa chedi papang gore la gora tadi dinde chewa ina chana ngishan simbe chubala soba dinde re la chitengi dura dena ane tsawa na kala na simjen thangchi dende pes nganzu ge ta chana ge ta nganzu do ina sama jachunju ina kale khabare me shanchu simba zu kala na simjen thamchi dewa de gora dende pe shanchu tene semchi nes 소소게 상주주도 생기네 예스라라 아니 심제 랑기 세 데니나 라 심제는 소소게 대화타바이나 대고 찌때 초월치스 대 가르나 심제라라기 대화타바 대화니와다 데이나 데디가나 처럼 가지는 초기도 있어 초야 요 말해라 단도 초야기서라 가고 그래 심제나 대화이나 근데
Right, so then the next verse is talking about how to abandon intolerance or aversion towards their happiness, right? The other person's happiness. So it says, since one wishes all sentient beings to have happiness, then having generated the mind of enlightenment, when sentient beings find their own happiness, why do you get angry at them? Right, so here it's particularly talking about the Bodhisattva, right, who has generated this mind of enlightenment. And so, whereas for us we tend to think on a smaller scale, right, we tend to think about our own happiness mainly and maybe about one or two other people's happiness, the Bodhisattvas have taken on this responsibility of, taking care of the happiness of all sentient beings, right? So their main concern is the happiness of all sentient beings. So then having that in mind, it seems strange that, suddenly when one of these sentient beings attains their own happiness, we kind of dislike that or we have aversion towards that. It's kind of strange, right? So thinking, why do we get angry at them when they get their own happiness, since that is what we want for them in the first place? So in this case, it's bringing up the topic of bodhicitta, right, of the mind of enlightenment. So in Buddhism, this mind of enlightenment or bodhicitta, and likewise compassion, are considered really, really very, very important. And so I'm wondering if you know what this mind of enlightenment is, for example. That's a question. Yes, no?
आपका पता है आप बोलो क्या ये इंग्लिश में बोलना है वो सब समझ आएंगे ना बोधिचित्त के बारे में
it's the mind, it's the state of mind which anybody can achieve, also has it inherently, in which you want the benefit of not just yourself, but of all sentient beings. And sentient beings includes humans, animals, and like even hungry ghosts.
Anyone else?
No afflictions, maybe.
Patient, zubar.
Nyumo metta.
Ani shimba.
Anyone else?
Shanchu gu sem le da. Tipe jacha mosana tanda peda ngamso le loss chipe things over chawara. Shanchu gu sem le da kurang tsingi yo da tanda famous da. Ina khande shanchu tsingi khande rojula na chigi susu chibu mai me shanchu semba sindi. Pa chidang ge ngazo ge shanchu semba ye shanchu gu sem li jula che la ni yo ra. Da jen nyam je la ya da da. Da jen nyam ba je wa ngani de kyo da ngasin de. Dewa deba da dunye mende ba chi chung re le. Ba dinde go ne nga zo shanchu sen jole che dang chi yo re. Chi de khala na jinde me nga den chu. Ba jinde me nga den ta pe na ma she ba ten zo wa yon shang ba ni je la sam dan. Na dinde pa ne chi ki ka na zo shanchu sen jole che dang chi yo re. Ta ma de da.
So yes, the mind of enlightenment or bodhicitta is really a very vast and profound kind of a mind, right? So it means not just taking oneself into consideration, but also thinking about the welfare of all sentient beings. So we say that in general, in order to generate that mind within one's own continuum, to generate bodhicitta, there are two main methods to do so, right? So the first is the method of equalizing and exchanging self and others. And so here it's mainly based on the thinking that all sentient beings wish to be happy and don't wish to suffer exactly like us. And so by focusing on that equality of all sentient beings, generating this mind of enlightenment. And the second method is called the sevenfold cause and effect method, whereby one first generates the awareness, thinking of all sentient beings as one's mother, then thinking about the kindness of our mother, and thinking of wishing to repay the kindness, developing love, compassion, and so forth, leading to the development of bodhicitta.
ngazo sama chibare samishira tanda konsa cho kadi ngazo mi ba chibare deshi ra tene mambu chungu da dila dewa yore kanza ngazo chibare samna ani mi la phai nyapchu she te legi marra ngazo sama chibare da ora kele nge ende shine chola na yara ngala na yara kon sama chibare ra sama la chibu yuna chiki tenje phusun soba da desa da sa ya to ya khari tenje phusun sa na khola chibu yore ngala chibu yora ro college women and a chicken, Calota. Adu sama chipar restra. Pena desa rojana ngala ya bogoro chola ya bogora. Ngachi bola ya chola mevana tele ndi mal sama chipar restra. Mi sama la goya chipar mado kena chipola gor ngala go mal tele mal chesa nyambala de nganzu chi sama khari na dewa deba chumba da dungi min deba ani chipar re la da je nyamra da da shin de.
So in terms of this first method of equalizing and exchanging, so the meaning of equalizing is to really emphasize this way of thinking that all sentient beings are the same in wishing to be happy and not wishing to suffer, right? So His Holiness the Dalai Lama often mentions this, the way in which all sentient beings are always wishing for happiness and we don't wish to suffer even for a moment, right? And so, for example, like if someone, if someone hits you, you don't like that. But then another living being is exactly the same. If they are hit, they also don't like that. Whereas, if we have something nice that we get, then we really like that. And it's exactly the same for all living beings, that they also similarly like that. There's no such a thing as like, if it's good for me, but it's not really good for the other person. In general, everyone wants to be happy. They're all exactly the same in that way. And likewise, they're all exactly the same in not wishing to suffer.
Tadi nganzo shilo do di hawar ra ani thapa de chije lamkor bas de do di ra ani changaj ni chige to susu desa ya poko ache ko de nami tane mi khaji da chige chitse nga do lang na chuye ja so ku ja gal de de ti nganzo da jin je yo mara kesi ko o da chokale ka kena de ani ngaya na ge la des jo ja do ani di te san ma je ani nganzo de ta Koranza de bas na de shere de paila ba saje yabora tenjin zabo inda de sanga jo do gejman ngati de wala de dogo chagira tine ani gengo do na ani khashi chimi khashi pu khudini do khashi neba ro de na ngazo so tha tes thambo yidi konjule hi je na so ya la konju de chu do tine zo ai ne tian so da jin nyamba je wor jiro gesi ngadi nya de ne na ngala khazi kale ra tine insa ani nge o di ko le peng ka ni chumbo je tine ngani je wo je ko la ero de che yamne do che da.
So we can think, for example, if we get on a bus, right, and the bus is incredibly busy, and it's all these people around, and so we generally hold on very tightly to our place, right? We really, we have our seat, and we really hold on to it tightly. And if we see other people getting on, we're like, oh, okay, but at least I have my seat. Whereas this is kind of the opposite attitude, right, which is very strongly holding to our own kind of well-being. Whereas, if we suddenly see someone like an elderly person or someone who's pregnant or with a baby or something, then, we can think that actually, that person, is exactly like me. They wish to be happy and they don't wish to suffer. And if I were in their position, it would be so kind of someone to offer their seat to me, and I would really, really like that. So thinking like that, thinking, okay, so I can offer my seat to this other person, based on that understanding of the equality between self and other. Do you do that when you go on the bus? Or wherever?
Yeah, that's good. They wanted the niche de Abuda. Nine Damza Bas the Nudia, Mikashika, Puti, and Zamza Chigira. I meet some of the Chitumda. Because you only can you to the Kashi Chala Mabukida, the Shola Puk, the Shola Chalaki, the Tangan and the Pecalera, the Dugala, Manzuki, Robache, Keshamara.
Yeah, so for me, I try to do it whenever I can, but not everyone can do it, right? Not everyone has that awareness to be able to do it at that time. But generally, when we see these people, some, if they've got children with them, or they have all these things that they're carrying, and it's quite useful to have that awareness to be able to help them, rather than only thinking about ourselves, right?
Dice tanda senchi na dala ta dingal tis donen di dora dice dan kecha mura ta tanda di da jin nyamba jewala ta yang dile to potho da ndi san ta wai ne chirangi ngazu ge mi shimba ge dungi di susu sene susu ge dewa di patel and ta jewa jaya mar da ine ya sam ta da di ta pena shanshi sama da susu na wai na ta o ngam mi sama ge na ya di na sa di susu ko chi o sho sa ye ra de ge sam ta da anu ta kola kangi chungwa le de nga kangi chungna gasan ta zo ete se ta beta kor ta jinya de ta garan chage ne me de kada sho chungba chi chawa da
sho chungba
da na dawo do chi da
So then on top of that, right, then there's also, so in actuality, there's no kind of, it's not that we can actually directly kind of swap with other sentient beings and take away their suffering and give them our happiness directly, but it is the practice of the Bodhisattva then on the basis now of this equalizing and now exchanging, this idea that at least thinking about it, thinking, may it be the case that rather than this sentient being suffering, I would suffer instead of them, or may I be able to take that suffering from them and so forth. So it's something that kind of comes along with it, this particular practice.
Teacher, Tandangazoe, Tatandati Dasin Jewale, Indonesian, Tapenanzo, dear, Gindeming, Dejugo. Then answer the game, but Tasimawata, debate show, Kainana, Tambo Kora, Mashipa Laja, Mashipa attended, Mashipa Galami, Topalevo, Ra, Hashing Machinga, Sima Bozivo, Keragi, Smianaji, and Mashigona, Sugipala Amana Reves. Ra, Tanteki Pala and Amamaro, Ine, the Dig Subatore, Inea, or the Dig Subatore, Ine, Carlana, Tanteki Pala, the Pala de Amamares, Inea, my Simjatan Mark and this Shigolana, Tangandu Namba in a Johashi Kenawara. Johashi Kenawara is any Sindichibu Maimba, Nala Joe, Tonda Jaramambo, Joalendi or Ra, then Sadigala, and Simjan Tamji, that's also not to Joe and the Mamboling allowed. Tangat and the Zimatu and see as a Java language. Then they Java language, Java language, Contosamling Amachesa, Ra. Chesadigala, Tandegi Ama the Sosola Kadichimbush, Ra. Which you got to Chimatawani, any Amagi, Social Amagi, Yella, Togona, Kigo, any Machesadini, Amagi, Kalashimbudia or Marte, any Bay Pugudel, Chutu, Shipet, Dichura color. Chinata Pala, Chigode, Amagi. Mahachura. Today it's Ami Kadechimbuinza, and Tanda Kongi Amamare, the Joe Hamani Amachidi. Taranashi, Joe Hamani Amachibi Negabla, Tandengara Amadi Karichivanashi, Konzuichi, real and Shiningato Mashiva the Dewana, Mashiva Tendan.
So then that's kind of the way of thinking in terms of the equalizing and exchanging, but also we have this method in terms of the sevenfold cause and effect. So there we begin by thinking that all sentient beings are mothers. And so, when on the debate yard, especially when we're kind of younger, then we have a lot of debates like, how is it possible that all sentient beings are our mothers? Like, that would mean that my father is my mother, and things like that, and that doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? So it's not the case that our father is our mother, but it's the fact that thinking about previous lives, right? Having had so many previous lives, we have taken birth, kind of thousands and thousands, and we say kind of countless times. And so during those countless rebirths, we've had all these different mothers, and then those mothers are no other than all these sentient beings around us. So then thinking about the kindness that our present mother has shown us in this life, right? Taking care of us, carrying us in her womb for so many months and giving us food and the milk and, pretty much 24 hours, being, taking care of us, that incredible kindness. Or, so our dad is also doing some of that, but probably not as much as the mother, right? So that's why the mother is considered, to be the kindness. But then also thinking that just in the same way as the mother of the present life has shown us this incredible kindness, then all sentient beings in a previous life, when they have been our mother, have likewise shown us the same kindness.
So, the Ponzo Union, delay say a hokora, so you Pamainza Kadichi. Nine Suzubu and Yegi, Yamanegi, teacher, Pinjashir. Because the Putamachini, still, Tanga Dagade, Machinuga, Dagade. Did missing Michi, Buddha, the Pay Kalakahodo. That Hamad the one there, Hansa, the Kali setting the cook caution the Petocolapa, Yamomasin, Sungoya Chomida, not the Chishita Rodo, the Wood Yormado, the Nerojita, Pamachinuga, the Ushin, and the Tanzamigala, Soto Kalikaburda. Right, the day and Chinazo Petocora, Condition Takalo, Sotan Europe, Kudu Kalikawichin and the Sonda. Tayachimbocha, and other shoes and Thomas Chora, think of the China when it's Chimribera. Taina touched it to Jericala, Manasu, Numba Donajora, Ra, Chunzo de Pamala and Tilamadini Abumarilana, Tilla to Homa, the Sosu Numba Dona, Chiura. In air, Kajimaji so tired into Kawadi, Pamala and Yabuche with the Pekichamura. Mazuchu got the bay. Kalota, Budochi, they Saburo, yeah, social Ramira, at Lapad Amay College and the social. Those are the town, and they pummel around playing on the Scotch leader.
So, so we should think really how incredible kindness is. So, some of you who might have children, then you might know firsthand. I don't have children, so I don't know firsthand, but I have friends who have children, and when you see the children when they're very, very, very young, it's quite incredible, right? It's like they're so helpless and they're so fragile, right? That if you don't take care of them incredibly doubtfully, then they're going to die by themselves. Right? You even have to take care of where they place their head and what they do, and everything about them is so fragile that such an incredible amount of care needs to be given to even just keep them alive. So this is an incredible kindness that is shown to us when we're very, very little. And then the thing is that then we grow up and we kind of think so much of ourselves, we kind of forget about that, right? We think, we think so much and we kind of forget about the kindness of the mother. But we shouldn't really do that, because we should think like how it's independence upon that kindness that we are who we are. And likewise in different countries, there might become this kind of different ways in which people might actually come to dislike their mother or have problems with their mothers. But it's really something quite astounding, because in a way the kindness of the mother is something so incredible. Thinking just about how they took care of us, or when we were so fragile, is something that something we should really think about how it's possible to repay that kindness.
Any Chesanta, Simjatani Mashitati in the Ra, Casanacho, Sojotoman, Banamaimba, and Hakuris. Tinsata, Mashiba, 10 Ladical, Tandega Amay Social Katicham Kazira. And there's a detail in our crying among up Amachitical, Katikali, and Nalabe Katicham Risra. 10 Timbalet, and Boya Tango, crying Kadidia Tim. 10 so Ladigala. Tandeng so amagi suzala yapochi ani so ngato gengo chadikala amagi tulute ne amala chikar robache den chiguda tina jegi ani suzugi jang amagi simjitan jang amainza tuzula kantu tu chigur ten so wala digala nyama robache sheji de la pa lender lora mashiba ten so ani yon la digala susu amma khande dong yabajina susu yapo thongor ra ye dong wala ra chedan ngato mi chamala ani ye dong wa ta ko dujare ko chiro ne ane mama ta chi yon tede ye de won cha digala ani jamba ra kula jambe lo chao ra de shangchong che lo di je ko mashiba ten yon shamba ani hasam la digala ta jamba che wa ta ko le yapo yung ba sho ande de samna de yapo de ra ta yapo wa de hasam di ngara ra chi ko le yapo da ji bu ye chi de ngara ra chi hasam na da la jo rang zo ra ne ya hasam se mashiba ten yon shamba hasam ani ka ta di ra 근데 안 세상에서 저는 좀 봐줘. 그래서 오늘 전 담보 아마디야 papa 마시바디 칸데는 하고 있는 심바도 칼리 정말 리에도시라. 알겠다. 좋아요.
And so in this way, like thinking about all sentient beings as our mother, and then likewise recalling or remembering the kindness of our mother, and being able to apply that to all sentient beings, then immediately arises this feeling of wishing to repay that kindness, right? If we're really able to recognize what an incredible kindness they have shown us, it's quite natural to have this feeling of wishing to repay the kindness. So, and we often have this with our own mother, like when the mother gets old and then we end up kind of taking care of her in the same way that she used to take care of us, right? And so, having this attitude, but really towards all sentient beings. And then that wishing to repay the kindness develops this love, this mind of love, and, finding that person, for lack of a better word, attractive or close and dear, right? Because again, it's like, it is said attractive because it doesn't really matter how ugly our mom gets, we still love her, right? And so we still want to take care of her, and so on and so forth. And so there is this love of wishing to help her and protect her from things. And then the next step along is developing also this mind of the altruistic intention or universal responsibility. So this is the mind, so again, thinking like this with respect to all sentient beings, but then also taking on that responsibility, thinking, I will do this, I will be the one to help my mothers and benefit them and so forth. And so in this way, thinking along these lines, one is able to develop this mind of bodhicitta gradually.
Yeah, so
we can have questions if you want.
question? Try it. Try some of that.
Maybe everyone's a bit tired.
Stop.
I think the other day I keep hearing the word phenomena. Phenomena that are like illusions. So what does it include?
To sometimes the choose and then the kind of guma nangshin guma tar ki choose say kashi type songs.
Choose juma na shire.
Choose say the kashi.
Shina Chule shina ngazo kona yani yada, right? Chutaji jumana shire le chuchi, manzo nambe yu chu da, da chulu chu le da yang. Chidangi tsengi tole shire ne chule de kal, dusu sama chule chi korda, ngobo sama le chule, right? Ti ngazo tanda dharma le de mare, right? Chutaji jumana shire le dusu sama tupa na shire le shiro di chuchi ke. Da chuchi de tai tari samsang ngazo de hije yumba, chule ne ani. Dharma le de ngazo ji khwa da yin so la ma sa ma ju ne zin ba le le ja thon ne de shi do ra yin ya chi de ngazo chue le de na che ge chue de kar la na simba ngazo simba do ni nyom da de cha sha nang zo wa de de ra ti ma ro chi ni zo je je ne so ni ya ba sho so no le ba to le bi sho la ta ya de la chue le ni yer
and it's on chidon true gumatabudi
ngada ngara tan de lo no chi de ngo bu chang ma na de chue le chi re sa ti ya nang be chi de sha sha ma ba
So in general we have so when we say phenomena, I guess it's usually a translation for the word dharma actually, and so in Tibetan Chö. And so actually it has various different meanings, right? Just also in Sanskrit, the word in Hindi has different meanings. So it's not to, in this particular context, like you said, it's not really referring to the context of like saying about the Buddha Dharma, where we're talking about the teachings of the Buddha or the way to practice, right? So in that context, when we say Chö, when we say Dharma, then it really means it's the verb to transform, and so we're transforming the mind from having the afflictions such as attachment and anger and so forth into overcoming them or subduing them into the positive states of mind. So that is kind of the Dharma in that sense. But when we speak about all phenomena, these being in the nature illusion-like and so forth, then the word Chö, or phenomena, is really just referring to all these kind of functioning things, right? So all these kind of different phenomena around us, and those being in the nature of illusion.
I have a question. How do you stay humble even when you always think like I am the one who will be like knowing and with wisdom and then I can help others to be happy, but still like being humble?
Understand?
냥체도 가르쳐
Right, and did you kind of tandan at the kind of haksam kikona tishes on and nga chegi and didn't you kind of nyam chegro lot of tempo dramatic.
Did the hasam ta de mar hasam de ko ka de humble rem de nyam chu rem de la wala
Le doctor drama.
hasam se ngara wali chegi la wala
chegi.
ni bet ko ra sanu ta ka ra 단다디 남들과 저기 냠주메디 나라라 인상데 죠 나베 야슈이 간제슈이 나 추슈이 나라 제메사디 나지디 디 하상마로 하상레디 지메신지 강예지 테데요나 강예 테디 그나이 제슈 말라제 저러게 지야라 콜로로바지 말라제 나라라기 칭긴는 니기 로바체디 나라라기 칭긴나 당나체로실라고 디니 카가르 베도 라 단당 저지 한벌면 나제래 줘라 나라라 인삼에들아 잠니가네 미사망가 마도 야신 nga 인삼데디 링가 제로 저거디 한벌 말레스 단달 하상부터는 콜라 펜셈이라 로기 로카카가라 디 페빌레가 두에디 나라게 치긴데 티즈칼로 뽀빠야로시라 라
So yes, these kind of two attitudes are quite different, right? So when we talk about pride, like the opposite of being humble, so we're very full of ourselves and we kind of think I'm the best and I'm all this kind of things. So then that's kind of the afflictive side of it, the unhelpful side of having pride. So whereas having this attitude of I'm the one who's going to liberate sentient beings, or I'm the one who's going to benefit sentient beings, it's not thinking like that, but rather it's this willingness to help others. So it comes from a mind of wishing to benefit others, and even if others do nothing, I am the one who's going to take on the task of helping others, alleviate their suffering. Right? So in that sense, it's not really anything to do with this pride in a negative sense, but you could say it's doing that in a positive sense and having confidence, right? That I am going to be able to do that.
Tinde lo yingi digi pesi mila roba chigi mare ko ngaje rojo nga ya shi nge kola khaje ni shogola ni pesi na tonju che lo dile nga tanda roba chigi ngara ra roba chigi samye dela ko pe nga ya shi tin ho mara ngi pi kangi ding ngara ra se ge le dile jile gor ma kesi ngara ya shi ngara je shi sampe to ko ma to me samde na pesi mi dela roba che da ko sanu ko ra khotu ma ta ko ngaje shoyra ra
So when we have this kind of afflicted pride, right, then we tend to look down upon others, right? So in that sense, it's likely that if we have pride, we wouldn't generally try to help others. We would be mostly concerned with our own well-being and happiness and suffering, and primarily concerned with our own self-interest, rather than taking on this idea of being helpful towards others and wishing to help others. If we had this very strong kind of pride. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Well, in our discussion groups, we've been all sharing our different types of ways of dealing with impatience, or how to deal with patience towards anger, or everything that we've been talking about. And like, for example, if we all agree maybe there is sometimes where you take, you're being patient, but there arrives a point where you just, either explode or you freeze. And like my example, it's happened where it's like explode, and at the same time I don't know what happens in that moment. So what would you recommend? What type of practices in order to I mean, it's not something that happens often, but like you are practicing, okay, I want to be patient, but then suddenly you're just like black out and you just explode, So it's really hard to do this, So how would you deal with it? If it happened to
kashi zuba gomna le majewa sang zuba gomna chida kashi gi pedo kora zuba gomna zube gi phen kar ra zuba ma gomna nyemi kar re de sama sano tan zuba gomi na kera ni maji parla ni gidi yo mares ra de sado manda ne daga tik sano shira manda ta ko ngel le jagi me sam daga ji sha na ti zuba de ni maji biji tan de musigre kala na mi ji anja kodo duja je aja te mai chi je ni je sum je shi nga ma mo chena tene utu ra mi ra tene kolong la ya le ra khana gi de zoba gomdi ga la ginje ma bo sano ta ni na ta khasang az de no sa zoba gi phe ni mi ani zoba gomna khandes gomdang de zo sama ma bo sano ta ni na peji di shu che mo de ling mar sam ta do zoba gom ma bo gom jinse ya bo sano ta ni na di zoba gomni gi mi di ne tu ha go ina ra kontro gi ni mi di zo ha go ina ta do khola pe 팔롱 나야 파샤슈 hinje rewair kasa konije dipape on basagdu samejiwa tindegi lo leyegi kogobires.
So yes, it's kind of difficult, but there's kind of two ways when we're thinking about practicing patience. There's kind of two ways of doing it, and people generally think in two different ways. So the first way is simply not to respond, right? And so we think we're being patient simply by not responding. But if we do that, then the other person might do it again and again and again, and then eventually we get to a point where, of course, we're going to explode or we're going to get angry, right? So it is much better to do it the other way, which is what it really means to practice patience is again to reflect upon all these things and try to practice that such that we're thinking about the benefits of patience, the disadvantages of anger, and thinking about all these different reasonings presented in the text, such that our goal is to overcome this mind of anger, and such that when we are faced with these situations, we don't respond with anger, but eventually are able to respond with compassion towards this person, right? Thinking that actually they're behaving this way because they're suffering and so on and so forth. So actually replacing that anger with compassion. So then, if we're able to kind of transform the mind in that way, then probably we won't, kind of get to that build-up.
티 응원에 가서 잠자 연구도 알아. 먼저 실로도 하는 이미 롱이도. 근데 롱이 배거. 먼저 거르는데 둘러서 빼면 되이도. 버르는 가서 농도 지나이도. 아티 야도나 저쪽만 말은 대샤간 잠자 농라인다. 안산 산에 야포치다나 이제 콜 요마르다 사야도야 카리네와 요마레 단도 디가랑 가서 농나 안데 콜 두자나 차랑 방고지 가지다나 대패사라 라 엔데로 제장 딜랭한 저거 단도 그냥 달롱이네 야포치롱스 엔데 대샤마당스 야볼라라 코라미다 고라 근데지 아니 수제야이네 야포친데 가시지 때네 엔데 마테샤이다 디콜 가서 보거라 어디네 맞아야지 제라 아니 다 미래 파이들 찍고셔도 제 인zam다가 좀 많아지 희제전에 희제께서 유래 그라 그 희제 자왕아마 그 레카를 쌓인다 산다 되네 쪼우차샤체 그라 이내야 잠자고네 시소 나랑서 로윤도 되네 용용도 니마가 멜로간지를 지친바이 대 아차치도라 코나롱이데 인사말 남들 아니 코나게가 강라를 두고 요사 강라라는 사지 텔을 두고 얘기 바꾸라스 무사 아니 얘기 안갈 고문업지시대로 지일았으라 그 가서는 강라를 두고 고문업지시 딱 납지스건 당했어라 아니 납지시대로 제가 바꾸라니 배 깔레카고 쇼차데라스 이 고문업지시대라 내가 줄라할 마트이 그런 약간 양가야 용디 미셔발라지 집어지자 아니 어디 미켜도 제스라 되니 미셔발도 그 되네 라고르사 내 담보도 그러면서 아 제가 산다 개마랑 아라기디 경험한 아라기 분야인지래 했어
So yeah, it can be very difficult. So for example, we often, we're going around, we meet all these beggars, right? And especially up in town, they can be very insisting, right? And you're trying to go, but they kind of spin around you. They're here, they're there, they're blocking your way, and it's very easy to, after a while, get really angry at them and kind of like try to shoo them away. But if we're able to kind of think a bit differently, then on the other hand, also, these people are kind of the object of compassion as well, because, they're very poor, they don't have a lot of food and somewhere to live, nice place to live. And if on top of that we start shouting at them by getting angry at them, then we're just adding to their suffering, right? So if we're able to think properly like that, it's much better to the way that we can at least behave towards them. And if we choose to give them money, that's great. But also when we give money, it's nice to give it respectfully, right? Some people kind of just to get rid of them, they just kind of throw the money at them or something, and it's not very nice. So if we do choose to give money, it's nice to do so respectfully in a nice kind of manner, right? So but also for me, once when I was in McLeod, and there was this woman there, and she wasn't like a typical beggar there, but she said she needed to go to Kangra and she lost her bag and stuff like that, and could you please give me 50 rupees? And so at the time, Geshema I just gave her the 50 rupees, and then she went and I went to the temple. And when we got to the temple, then it turned out that there were other people who were saying exactly the same, that she told them the same story, and that they also gave and things like that. And so at first I got kind of angry about it, right? How dare she and blah blah blah. But then a better way to think about it is that okay, so maybe I had some kind of debt to her from a previous life, and I just paid her back, and then it's a much nicer way to think. Have you had such experiences?
Yeah. I would normally, like when some things like this happen, I would normally think it's not a comfortable position to lie. So if they are lying, they're probably not in a very happy space. So even sometimes if it's obvious that they are lying, but I feel bad for them that they are in a position, and I'm in a position where I can do something.
Dendeki zuma shegu gi yuna and a peche consul sen kipush rang yo samarewa zuma dendeki shegu gi yuna and peche seno kipush rang yo mares and it's dendeki netang atis senkios consul di tis senkios
ade pagi midi zuma shi ni di kora neda cho ujire la ora
netang di kind
zuma shi di amo mare la ora
yapo mare ne an conto di carattis so kichedu inji minji de shigoro wana senkios 인제래 그러나 강의도 있기로 그러나 계속 남들 노니 매바이나 다고 무라야 탑시당 야 그러나 탑시시래 정말신의 뒤에 같이 우즈적으로 그치 때달라 같이 같이 버려시래 메시지다 그 탑시담이라 탑시 땅땅지로 같이 수술려고 하다시네 수술기 배셔서 무슨 당연히 치고 뒤에 미 탑시지 그 르기 남주이네 근데 탑시 땅땅지라 그러나 그러나 또 채워 또 칼라 간다 칼라 세워라 이네 디가 좀 만들어지라 그걸 쉬우는 거에다 캠더라 이네 코라이나 시네 칼라카브라. Yeah, so when people are placed in that position, they end up resorting to all sorts of ways, and so for them, like even lying and different things like that, they try whatever they can, right? Because they're in that kind of position, so they look for food, they have to lie, they have to do whatever they have to do. So from our side, at least, it's better not to kind of get angry at that as best we can. Yeah.
지난 가서 들이 통을 되가라 혼자로 너무 많아 셔봐. 단단 가서 디상산에 배 편도도. 단단 가서 직감바 라바 참마 차요래 수술래가 전에 치투 그러네라. 근데로리. nga saja diga lela pe thanyoura hagoye mara ra 단단 가서 다리 가서 로딜랑가 미친 미 루덴신 데라. 네 가서 디 사자 가서 레pe 감치그래. 라. 근데 우땅 가서 미치래 우파슈셔면 저러잖아. 슬래마도 시절. 시절은 저 관에 파이 방구 부거제로 그래 하고 말아. 디펠레서라. 세상 아주 가 쉬고인라네. 삼야미도. 만잠사 엔데 챙기도 먼저 젠시 칸데도 젠시 칸. 주. 근데 두라 아니 두담보다 샤와던데 망보다. 단단 가서 파 때문에 도. 라. 라. 이내 가서 나한테 우치네 파이 저는 미드스 날쓰다가리 라 디레테리가 뜻이 캔더로 통도 지상 아주 배 타니 오래 수수수 쇼인 제하여 말아 내가 레를 까마치금 싶어 마
Yes, so in general, we shouldn't have this kind of very strong. Again, it kind of comes down to pride of like thinking, oh, I'm so much I'm such in a better position than that. I'm so much better than that. And likewise, not to get angry with that. We should be really thankful on the one hand that we do have a body, that we have all our limbs and all our faculties, and we're able to work if we want, and so on and so forth. But likewise, we shouldn't have that as a way of looking down upon these people, because actually we're not so far away from being in that position. Right? Actually, it could, we don't know how things are going to change, and it could be a minute's difference, and we can be in that position, right? All it takes is that we breathe out and we don't breathe in again, and that's how you die, right? And then you can take rebirth in whatever you don't know. You could be reborn as the child of that very same beggar, right? So, we think we're so well off and we're so protected, but actually it's very close to being in that situation, much closer than we think. And likewise, sometimes I think about the animals at the zoo, right? We go and we look at the animals at the zoo when we're like, they are kind of an attraction. But again, you're one breath away from dying. You could be reborn as the animal at the zoo. Suddenly people will be coming to have a look at you, right? So it's good to remember that.
세상은 저기 미조이네로 watch이나 그 제위잖아. 소소 곰찍마도 면에 구셔야 되는 맛이잖아. 코로나 생각을 이제 콜레지 통주로 해주잖아. 교육 간에 앉아서 교육이 넘베로 자오라. 근데 지금 나가서 가리네. 수제는 때때면 나라미에 야보진 라산디오라. 때에는 야보진 때냐오다. 라. 내가 시시로 다냐 지라는 말하냐 그 선배 줘디라. 근데 제 백기 좀 그랬어.
But whatever we end up doing, it's really nice to have, treat these people respectfully, right? So whether we choose to give or we don't choose to give, doing it with some kind of respect for the other person, right? So because again, if we give and we don't do it in a very nice manner, they might get that money, but that doesn't really make them very happy, right? Whereas even if we just give 1 rupee, but we do it in a really nice and friendly manner, then they're going to be quite happy as a result, right? So whatever we choose to do, it's nice to do it kind of with respect for the other person.
아니, 나 참
Oh,
잘하라.
yeah. So we've run out of time.